Welcome back, my friends, to Blues Retro Repair. Now, last time I showed you a basic trick that will get your games running most of the time. But let's say, for instance, that technique didn't work. So, what do we do next? Well, that's what I'm going to show you here. I'm going to show you the absolute best method to clean these things. And if it doesn't get it working, then you may have a more serious problem. Alright, so before we dive in, we gotta have our supplies. Like last time, have some more rubbing alcohol and cotton swabs, but this time you're going to need a pencil eraser and two special tools. Now you'll see this is actually no ordinary pencil eraser. It's actually a kneaded artist's eraser. It's basically like silly putty, but it's used by artists to erase little things less thoroughly than a large eraser would. Plus, this eraser doesn't leave behind shavings. Now while you could use any other regular old eraser you can buy at the store for $1, because this thing doesn't leave behind shavings, and because I have a trick I'm going to show you later, I highly recommend getting one of these instead. Now the special tools I mentioned are actually called security bits. You can do a quick Amazon search for Nintendo and Sega Genesis security bits and pick out the ones you like. The brand I have is from Silver Hill Tools. Okay, so let's open up this copy of Boogerman. Now as you saw from the last episode, I managed to get it working just fine. But let's make this thing like brand new. Now I know newcomers are going to be a little intimidated by opening up their cartridge games. I can't blame them. But I promise, you'll be fine. You see, you actually can't close these things without the chip being in place the right way. So if you can close it, you got it in the right way. These things are idiot-proof. You'll be alright. Alright, now you see these little bitty marks on the cartridge? Well, those are actually oxidized metal, which is bad. Sometimes it can interfere with the cartridge being read. It doesn't affect this one in particular, but it could cause some interference one day. So here's what you're going to want to do to remove it. Take a cotton swab with some rubbing alcohol on it, and gently go over the connectors. Then I want you to take the eraser and gently go over them where the oxidization is at. You don't really have to use the alcohol on it, but I personally find that the rubbing alcohol makes it so that I don't have to put as much pressure on it to clean up the oxidization. But you still need to put some amount of pressure on it, just don't put too much. Now as you can see, this one side is perfectly clean. Let's just do the other side and then make sure it's dry before you put it back together. And there you have it. This copy of Boogerman may as well be brand new because there's no grime or oxidization on the connectors. This thing should be playing perfectly from now on. Now remember, in the first episode I said there's a crack in the copy of Batman on the NES. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up that one with the other security bit, and we're going to fix that. All we got to do is open it up, push the plastic together, and then apply some Gorilla Glue. And I actually recommend Gorilla Glue the most because it has been my go-to glue for plastic repair for years now. So back to that kneaded eraser from earlier. Why do you need an eraser that is so stretchy and putty-like? Well, it's quite simple. Does anyone else know about Shaq Fu on the Sega Genesis? My review of it is actually one of my favorite episodes to date. And well, I have a couple other games with the bizarre Electronics Art cartridge, and one cartridge in particular with this really weird Y-shaped security bit. And the security tools that I have for it does not fit, and I can't open it. I also have another one for Maximum Carnage, and it has a third type of security bit. Where were these things coming from? What the hell was wrong with the regular ones? I have no idea where those things were coming from, and I most certainly don't have the tools to open them up, but that's where this little bad boy comes in. Because you can actually shape and mold it, you can actually get inside where the cartridge is without needing to open it up. Although I recommend opening it just because you can see what you're doing and you can make sure that you get all of the oxidization off, but this is a good alternative. And since it doesn't leave shavings, you're not going to have them stuck inside your cartridge, which is a big plus for me. Alright, just like last time, let's go over some myths. Myth number 1. You shouldn't use rubbing alcohol because it contains glycerin, which leaves a small residue. Rubbing alcohol does not typically contain glycerin, and if it does, my research shows that glycerin is actually an inactive ingredient in the brands that do have it. Besides, the residue it leaves behind really isn't that big of a deal anyway. You can just as easily wipe it away with the other side of a cotton swab. No biggie. Basically, make sure the cartridge is dry before you put it in the console. That's all I'm saying. Myth number 2. You should wait at least 24 hours before playing your games after cleaning them because it takes time to dry. Rubbing alcohol does not take 24 hours to dry. Not even 1 hour to dry. A very thin layer of it on something can be dried in room temperature or in a few seconds just by blowing on it. Again, just take the other side of the cotton swab and make sure it's dry before you put it back in. Myth number 3. Never use any sort of rubbing alcohol that's under 90% pure. I've never noticed any sort of quality difference between using 70% rubbing alcohol versus 90% rubbing alcohol, and I can't really find any sources that say to the contrary. The most I've ever seen are people saying that you want to use more pure alcohol because it has less water in it and you want less water on your cartridge. Well, that would be one thing if alcohol and water didn't form a hydrogen bond. I won't go into the chemistry of what a hydrogen bond is, but let me just summarize it for you. There's no way I can pour this into a glass, leaving it sitting on a windowsill with the sun hitting it for a few hours, and only the alcohol will evaporate, leaving water. It just doesn't work that way. If you want to use more pure alcohol, then be my guest. There's nothing wrong with using more pure alcohol, but if you ask me, 70% will work just fine. Though personally, I suggest staying away from anything below that, but that's just because I've never really experimented with anything below 70. Well, that's the best way you could clean your cartridges and debunks a few myths. Now come back next time, and we're going to take these adhesives off of them, and some game cases as well.